This group of young men had to deal with the police due to their problematic behavior. Some of them were involved in selling drugs, assaulting police officers, and even selling illegal goods. They were Angel, Davis, and Butch. They had to answer for their actions and were sentenced to prison. They were also supervised by a strict warden named Goodyear. The rules were explained to them, and anyone who behaved well during their imprisonment would have a chance of early release. Otherwise, they would be sent to a more restrictive prison. Before he had been there for a day, Butch already ran into trouble. A chef, also a longtime inmate, named Banks, injured his hand, which upset Butch. Max, a fellow inmate, warned Butch not to get into trouble with Banks, as he was dangerous and the boss there. Davis had some dealings with Banks, but he remained silent because he was afraid to fight back. At night, Butch became a victim of violence from Banks and his gang. He was attacked while sleeping. The next day, Goodyear found Butch battered. Butch was later summoned to see the warden, but he didn't reveal what had happened to him. Inside the prison, there was a simple class for the inmates to keep them learning and mentally strong. The teacher was Mrs. Biggs. Days passed, and Angel, Davis, and Butch were constantly harassed by Banks and his friends, but they remained silent. Until one day, Davis, who was watching television, was suddenly harassed by Banks' friend. Butch, seeing this, became enraged and taught the man a lesson. Afterward, they confronted Banks in the restroom and immediately began to teach him a lesson. From that moment on, the power within the prison shifted to Butch. He controlled the situation, including the shady transactions within the prison. Without Banks's presence, the prison situation became calmer, and the inmates, including Davis, could rest more securely. Once, Davis recounted an old experience of staying over at a friend's house. While watching television, his friend's mother suddenly returned home. Davis panicked, fearing he would be kicked out. However, instead, his friend's mother approached him and invited him to her room, where she began to make out. After months of serving his sentence, Butch's lawyer visited him, who told him that he could actually be released early if he didn't cause trouble in prison. The police demanded Butch be honest about the attack on Banks, but once again, Butch refused to confess. One day, Butch, along with other inmates, was assigned to paint a building, supervised directly by Goodyear. However, Goodyear seemed preoccupied at the time. It was supposed to be his day off, celebrating his son's birthday. However, the warden forbade him from going home. As a result, an argument broke out between Goodyear and his wife. The problem worsened when Goodyear saw Butch and several other inmates joking around by drawing an indecent picture of Mrs. Biggs. The drawing was made by Angel. Goodyear rebuked him and a fight ensued, but Angel was ultimately defeated and rushed to the hospital. The warden then investigated who was responsible for the incident, but it was Butch who was arrested. The absence of Butch naturally made Davis and Angel afraid of further harassment by the inmates. Sure enough, that day, several inmates approached them and forced them to make out from behind. As a result, he suffered serious injuries. That night, Davis asked the police for permission to call his mother, but the request was denied. The next morning, Davis was found dead. A few days later, Angel was also pronounced dead. Finally, of Butch's class, he was the only one left. His friends had died due to the poor prison system. Disappointment engulfed the inmates, sparking a riot. Max had helped Butch escape, but unfortunately, Butch was captured. Butch was sent back to prison, and his sentence was certain to be significantly longer for his escape attempt. And finally, the film ended.